Welcome to another Lunch with Philip and Greg. Today's guest is Gordon Burkell, who I know mostly because of the Art of the Guillotine, a community news site. Welcome, Gordon.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So where are you in your career right now, and how did you get to this point?
Well, it's been an odd route. So I started actually in sound, assisting a Foley artist on various cartoons, which is great. I don't know if anyone's ever seen Braceface or any of those cartoons in the 90s. I was doing noises.
I was a bit old for cartoons in the 90s.
But yeah, they're fun to make noise for. And and then sort of realizing I wanted to get more into editing. There was a guy who started working nearby named Alan Collins, who cut for David Cronenberg originally, cut for Degrassi and everything in Canada. And he needed help with the editing systems. So I started helping him with his editing systems, and we sort of built a relationship, and I started assisting him. And then once he moved out of editing and started directing documentaries, I started cutting his docs.
Okay, so you went assistant editor to editor.
Yeah.
That's a classic way.
But then I started sort of giving talks and everything, and I would always give out like lists of websites to check out. And that list was paper, photocopied a bunch of times, and then it became a really bad HTML site that I created. That was brown and white, terrible colors. Because when you're learning HTML, you're like, what the hell? How do I get a color here? It's like, so I got brown, and I was like, great, that's my color. And then my friend saw it, and he's like, that's terrible. And so he's sort of taken over the coding and helped me with that. Yeah, that's sort of where I am now.
Art of the Guillotine has probably made you internet famous. What does that feel like?
You know what? It's weird because someone actually recognized me in New York. Like I was on the street and they're like, "Excuse me, are you Gordon?" I was like, "Yeah."
Who wants to know?
It's like, why? I'm like in the middle of New York City, 8 million people, so I was pretty shocked. So that's probably been my biggest sort of
moment of internet fame.
Other than that, people are pretty. I mean, people are awesome. You know, like you just get emails and chat with people and meet people around the world. So there's a lot of people listen to my podcast and they reach out to me and just sort of connect, and then I stay in touch with them. So
Right. Yeah, the internet has made the world a much smaller place.
Which is amazing. It's weird that a couple of people I've met via my podcast, I've like slowly watched their careers grow, and then also their families and everything. So there's a guy in Amsterdam named Peppo who just became friends because he liked the podcast, and out of nowhere he's like, oh, now he's working on this show, and then he's moving up, and then just this year he had his first I think it's a daughter he just had, so it's pretty exciting.
And what's your goal with Art of the Guillotine?
The goal of the site is to share and get information out there to post-production professionals. And it's opened up. We've created a new discussion section so you can actually discuss things too. So the idea is just anyone can submit content, share it, and get it out there. So if people create something that's post-production related, they can share it with others. So that's our goal.
How has the content of the site changed over the years? I mean, apart from losing the brown.
Well, we opened up to more of posts, so we started adding color, VFX, sound, animation as well, just because that's where everything's going. Everything's sort of becoming, you can see it with Final Cut X, you can see it with Premiere. They've all started bringing everything together, where you can easily get between, if I need to do color with the new Premiere updates, I could just jump in and do it. With Final Cut Pro X, everything's in there, so you can just do it. So
the content is kind of reflecting where the industry's going, how there's more
it's
expectations from people.
Yeah, because the jobs are expanding, right? Everyone's expected to do so much more. Unless you're on a massive multi-million-dollar project that can have 5 editors, a couple of, colorists, a couple of people doing sound.
So do you think the role of the editor has changed?
I think so. I think definitely it has. Like when I started with Alan, if someone came to him and was like, "Can you do sound?" He'd be like, "No, that's not my job."
Right.
Right, and very strict on that. And then now, if I said that, they would go somewhere else, or you have to be very flexible. I do encourage people though, depending on the budgets, to spread it out. So like if they come to me for color, I usually say I can't do color, just because I don't know the theory well enough. I don't know technique well enough, I can push the buttons, but it'll look terrible. So that's usually what I tell people is like, I can do it, but I'm not great, and I'd rather you go somewhere to do a really good job, right? And most people understand that type of stuff. Because I worked a bit in sound, I can get away with sound and do a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, and you're working on Premiere, so are you going out to audition?
So I work with whatever really comes my way. What's funny is I started in Avid, obviously, because they were in around the 90s. And about like 3 years ago, whenever they bumped up to one of their latest updates, not the new cloud stuff, it was like version 8, I think. Version 8 or 6, one of the evens. Yeah, it might have been 6.
6 was the last one.
I bumped up and all my stuff stopped working.
Whoa!
And then, so I was like, oh, like my Mbox, everything just stopped working. And then I was talking to a friend at Adobe, and they're like, oh, here, just take a couple months on Premiere. And so that's how I moved to Premiere. And then last year, someone gave me a copy of Final Cut. So someone from Apple. And I've just started playing with that. And what's really interesting is there was a discussion on AOTG that it was basically someone's like, what's your NLE of choice and why? And this one guy I wouldn't have said it like a year ago or something along those lines, but Final Cut X. And here's why. And he broke down, it was really interesting. He's like, they dragged me in kicking and screaming, but it's just faster. It just, at the end of the day, it moves.
So many people say that.
And that's the thing. He's like, he goes, it took me a couple weeks. He's like, to be honest, it took a couple weeks, but once he got it, it just flew. So I've started playing with it because I've seen I've had this almost the same, I had this conversation yesterday with an editor at the event. So I'm starting to play with it just to see what it's like. And
yeah, I know somebody who I would consider to be a really smart guy, and he honestly told me that it was 3 months getting comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then he loves it, and he thinks.
And that's what I've heard with a few people. It's like once you, I think it's also you need a project. Just opening it up and moving things around, you're not going to get an experience in a sense.
Right.
And that's what I've been doing, is just moving stuff around. So I got to get a project in there.
I think life in 10 is a lot easier since we got libraries. I think before that, when we just had events and projects, that was...
Yeah, it took a few iterations to get things the way that work for more people.
And I think that's what scared most people, is like, oh my gosh, we don't have XML. Oh my gosh, we don't have do 2 monitors. And
well, we didn't have XML in version 1 of Final Cut, which was version 3, and that was 5 years in the original Final Cut before we got an interchange format. But the ecosystem is so important to Apple that it was released, and then before multicam, before video out, we had XML. That's how important it is in the priorities. Yeah. So how do you go about embracing change?
In what way?
Do you welcome change? Do you fight change? Like when Final Cut 10 was announced, was your initial response like, oh great, something new to explore? Or
I was really excited when it was coming out. Then I got it, and I was like, the day I got it, I opened it up, was ready to go, and then I couldn't use it. Like I had the issues of, because I do a lot of docs.
Right.
And so I had like pulling off tape issues, all that stuff initially in that first and so I was really excited about it, and then I had to put it aside and then just keep going with other things, because I used Final Cut 7 for a while too, right? And loved it. So, but yeah, I'm always open for experimenting and changing, trying different things, because you never know what you're going to find, and that's usually where the fun, unique things you discover are. So,
what's the most fun thing you've discovered playing around with any app, not just Final Cut?
With any of the NLE?
Any NLE or any other app that you might have played with.
Trying to think, there was something.
I used to, back when I had time, and back when I was more, doing a lot of After Effects work, I used to, every time I got a new plugin pack or a new plugin, I would go through every setting and just, go to its extremes to see what it did, so I had a feel for what I could get out of this plugin. But who has time to do that now?
Yeah, no, and they have that brain button or whatever. Now, like you click the button, it shows you all the options in After Effects. Have you seen that?
Right.
I can't remember what it's called.
No, I'm a little bit out of touch with the modern After Effects. Yeah. After Effects 2 through 4 and 5.
It basically does what you're saying. It gives you like 9 options, and then you flip the page, there's like another 9 options, and it's just like the different
Okay.
like styles, and I think it's called Brainstorm.
Okay.
And it's like for the lazy person to just be like, what's a good idea?
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. So it shows you variations based on what the plugin can do. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
One of the things that I really like about Final Cut 10's effects panel at the side is that you kind of hover over it and it shows you the effect applied to the unrendered media, which is...
And that's the thing that speeds your work up, right? Because then it's like, as opposed to like clicking, and that's what everyone's been saying. It's like yesterday the guy was really focused on the multi in and outs on a clip before you bring it in.
Oh, I hate that thing.
I find that completely useless, but anyway.
He was coming from, but that's the thing, he was like, he's a doc editor.
Yeah.
And he said, what happens is he'll have an hour clip in his thing, and he'll be like, okay, I want this section, this section, this section, this section.
Keyword ranges are full.
Drops it, yeah. But he finds that so fast, and it's like, loves it. Yeah. So it's little things, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the reasons Lumberjack works only with Final Cut 10 is because there's nothing really equivalent to that keyword range, keyword collection that's going on in Final Cut 10.
Well, that's the thing, their metadata is killer.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And that's where they're killing everyone else, right? Like,
yeah. Well,
Adobe's catching up, but not much.
I think Adobe are doing a great job of implementing the tool that everyone wanted 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And, you know, to be truthful, if I had the current Adobe suite back in the business I had in Australia, I would be in heaven. You know, because it was an editing tool, it was a lot of After Effects. I was using Media 100 and After Effects for a lot of the time, and then Final Cut and After Effects. You know, the current suite with all of those tools there would just be perfect.
Media 100. I haven't used that.
Media 100.
Well, it's still, who owns it now? Someone.
Boris.
Yeah, Boris.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got two surprising features that I've found out only in the last week, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks, I'm not sure. Okay, the first one is in Premiere.
Yeah.
You can name tracks.
Yeah, I just discovered that like a month ago, and I was like,
Awesome.
I know, it was what I wanted in classic Final Cut. It was a feature request in version 1 through 7, never implemented.
well, it's funny too, because you think that they would have announced that or been like, hey guys, just so you know, in this update, you can name tracks.
I don't know where it came from, and I must say I'm not the most diligent reader of release notes, but I'm just surprised that snuck in with no fanfare.
Yeah.
Because I know so many editors who are like, how come you can do this in audio, in
Right.
Audition, and not in Premiere? Such a...
I think it might be because the default track height doesn't show it. You've got to sort of expand the track height, and that allows you to edit it or something like that. And on a related note, in Final Cut 10, if you add a secondary storyline, you can give it a name.
Oh yeah?
Yes.
That's an interesting feature.
You do it you rename it in the timeline index.
Okay.
And so it's a way of being able to kind of name and sort of cluster together your secondary clips.
Cool.
That's pretty cool. And it's in the XML.
There's so much stuff in those systems, man. That...
Well, the weird thing about the naming of the secondary storylines, I went back and looked at the old XML specs, and it looks like it's been supported since the very beginning, and yet I've never heard of it before until last week.
No one's chatted about it or brought it up in a blog post or anything?
No, the first I saw about it was last week on Facebook. So
Yeah.
We watch a lot of cooking shows. A lot of cooking shows.
yeah, it's terrible.
How do you like the, what is it, the MasterChef Juniors?
I haven't killed that, but a friend of ours told us we should watch it, and we started watching the American MasterChef, and it was just so overproduced that we really couldn't watch it.
It's interesting though, because the kids, did you watch first season of MasterChef? Or, because I was talking to the editor in the UK, and he was saying that they did the first couple seasons of MasterChef, and then they did the kids, and then they went back and retooled the style that they did MasterChef, because they found that the kids were more open to helping each other and were less vicious.
Yeah.
Is that, you know how they're sort of over the top, like, I'm not going to give you the pepper you need or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, what happened was we started watching the American one, which has got Gordon Ramsay, so that puts me off immediately. We decided it was really overproduced, and we started watching the UK one.
yeah.
And it is so civilized and so pleasant to watch.
Yeah, and it has no talking heads apparently. Is that what I'm saying? Or they try to do it more verite or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's definitely not really a sense of, well, at the end of watching the show, I feel like I've learned something, because people talk about what they're cooking, what their, their style of food and whatever. So I kind of like it.
So it's less of a competition and more of a actually working on the.
Movies tend to be a little too long. I find
The
sitting.
last one that we really, really liked was Chef,
Yeah.
which is food again. So
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Chef's a great film though,
Yeah, it was a great film. The nice just people and small scale.
and the cooking shots. You can tell that I can't remember the director's name, but he loves cooking. Right? You can just tell by the way he shot it. And
It was beautiful.
Serena recommended Whiplash, which I thought was a great movie. I mean, really well made, but not a movie that I was really thankful that I saw.
it can be tough on because it's so in your face at some moments. It's just visceral.
Yeah, it's a bit disturbing, wasn't it?
I was saying to my wife when we watched it, I was like, I guess I'd never be a famous jazz drummer because I'd be like, fuck you, and like stormed off.
Yeah, it's hard to understand the motive. I guess some people are just so obsessed.
Yeah, you want to be the best, right?
So what are we going to talk about after we've eaten?
What was I just about to ask?
We've done background.
I'll probably ask about what changes you've seen in the technology in your career so far. How long have you been working as an editor?
Started editing in 99, 2000.
So you've seen significant change, yeah. Not quite from, the end of the tape era still.
Yeah.
When I first saw Final Cut 10, it reminded me of Media 100.
Oh man. I remember.
It's not true, but-
Yeah, that was one of the first systems I learned on was Media 100.
I had a very early version of Medium. I got it the day before Christmas Eve, 1994.
Wow, you're old.
I was 12.
Well,
Early adopter.
you must have been a very good boy that year.
Santa was very good to me.
Good.
And we took it home and then over the next 2 days tried to work out what we had. I'd captured in a bit of, I think, the movie of Mame
Okay.
that we were playing with just to have some footage. Oh well.
I know you had trouble working out how to turn the Macintosh on,
Oh yeah, I absolutely could not turn a Mac on.
because you'd had
We had Amigas up to that point.
I remember teaching editing, and for the longest time having to show people how to turn the Macs on because they have the different buttons, and it was all clean in the front. I'm like, no, it's right there, and they'd be like pushing the speakers and trying.
But Philip did one 6-month period of training around Australia for Media 100, didn't you?
Media 100 and After Effects, yeah. It wasn't 6 months. We did it over about 3 months in different cities. Yeah. Well, Adelaide, Melbourne and Sydney, really. We tried to organise Brisbane, but nobody was interested. And Perth was simply too far to travel. Yeah. The stupid thing was that Adobe were absolutely no help providing copies of After Effects for training. So, for the purpose of training, we used an unauthorised version, because it's very easily obtainable.
Yeah. Still, even with their cloud, I know a few places that have had to do that.
Although your career is not as long as some people that we've talked to yet, continue to be long and prosperous, but even over that time you'd have seen significant change in technology, in editing technology and acquisition technology. What was the technology you were first working with?
Well, because Alan liked to cut on film, we cut on film. So, but then whenever he could, he would cut on film, but he was forced a lot to cut on Avids and what have you. So that's sort of where I got into digital. First system I learned on was Media 100. Then Avid, then Final Cut,
Media 100 was very good to me, I can't complain.
then Premiere, After Effects. You know, you just sort of move up. In terms of like biggest change, or like, it's hard to say because it's almost been like a constant change. Like every year, something shifts slightly, and you know, so like Mini DV comes out, and then a year or two later, it's like the next sort of iteration of whatever is coming out.
But you would have experienced the shift into digital, so that would have been pretty huge.
It was huge, but it was also most of your time is spent explaining it to someone. So it's
Really?
well, because you're helping. Like I was helping Alan, and so a lot of times like we would cut together so that he could get a handle of the system and get an understanding of it, and then I would go back and deal with like the rushes and what have you. It's an odd thing when you're sort of brought in to just sort of essentially push buttons, because you're just there to make sure it works and doesn't fall apart. And then at the same time, at least in our area, because the Avids were so expensive, people would hold on to them as long as they could, so they wouldn't have to pay for the update.
That's right.
So it's interesting because all this technology would update and you'd be seeing it, but you wouldn't be touching it. Right. And I see that today even when Adobe updated a small update like a week or so ago, and everyone I've talked to is like, I can't touch it until I'm finished this project. Right? Because if I update, it screws everything up. So, and docs can be a long process.
Very long.
So there was one point where it was on like an old Avid, and we were in, there's a place in Toronto called Charles Street Video, and it was like, it felt like we were like duct taping things together and holding it together just to keep it alive for the end of the project, and it was scary.
Well, I think that's why documentaries are why classic Final Cut still hangs around in this town, is because there are projects that started 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, that people don't really want to make that big transition.
So yeah, especially if something goes wrong and you lose something. And
what do you think about this, what people are calling the democratization of production? We've gone from a position where there were relatively few people working in expensive facilities with expensive equipment, to a place where we've got over 1 million seats of Final Cut. We've got God knows how many seats of Premiere Pro out there, 100,000 or so Media Composer. Has this democratization affected you at all, and do you think it's a good thing? Or
I love it. I think it's a fantastic thing. I think especially with there's people I've seen who, if it wasn't for the democratization, wouldn't be where they are now. So there's two guys who are essentially comedians in Toronto, and they did a web show called NirvanaTheBandTheShow.com. And the whole premise is they formed a band and they called it Nirvana, but they have no concept that Nirvana actually already exists. And so they start actually calling all the local clubs trying to set up a gig for Nirvana. And all the clubs are like, Nirvana the band? Yeah, and they're like, yeah. And then the whole show sort of takes this weird twist where they decide to steal the band book from one of the locations to get it written in, to write their names in for like a gig. And, but, it was they cut it on Final Cut, they shot it on some DSLRs, and they just did it with friends, and it's hilarious. And it did so well that they got a feature film that was distributed last year. What was it called? It's distributed by Kevin Smith. Mm-hmm. And so there's no way, because I know one of the guys, and there's no way he could handle himself in a pitch meeting, because he's way over the top and way sort of like, because I went to film school with him, and we had in film school they're always like, you have to do this, and this, and your next project's going to be surprise us or hold us in suspense, and so you have to figure out how to do it. And this professor said, this project's going to be about surprise, so you have to surprise us. And so we go into these, and of course all the films are terrible, but we're going through them, and his film comes up.
Surprise.
Yeah. And his film comes up, and it's just a shot of his face, and he's like always scared, giving these like shocked, scared, in love, happy, like all these different emotions. And it cuts to what he's watching, and he had hidden a camera inside the professor's office and videotaped him.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's like him all shocked, scared, and then it's like him watching the professor. And he didn't tell the professor. And so we're all watching it, and all of a sudden the professor's face just drops because he's like, someone's been watching me in my office. So he was like, I'm like, that's the kind of sort of like, do whatever it takes to make a funny film or a cool film. And I'm like, going into a pitch meeting and pitching something like that, there's no way you would get, except, we're going to hide cameras. So the fact that he could just do it, just go out and shoot it, is fantastic. Because no way, if you watch the show, it's very much like Arrested Development or Flight of the Conchords, and it's also very racy, and so there's no way it would have gotten accepted by a regular broadcaster, maybe HBO, but that would have been a hard, if you have no experience or no background, to get it created. So
yeah, certainly it means that a lot of shows get produced that otherwise would have sit on the shelf in somebody's idea.
Yeah, and it's because they've seen, they've gotten a test run, right? Like all of a sudden, these guys have thousands of followers on Facebook and have a huge fan base.
Right.
and okay, well, we know they work.
Yeah, we have a big fan base of 200 people watching these lunch videos. And who thought it would never be successful?
But it's crazy. It's like, it's fantastic to see to see someone who would have probably had a lot of trouble getting into the industry because their ideas are so different. Rocket up really fast.
Yeah, if you've got an idea,
Just do it.
just do it. Yeah, don't hang around waiting for someone else to approve. And yeah. What do you think will be the biggest change coming? What would be your biggest change coming forward? You're going to have a long career yet, so you're going to see a lot of change.
Well, the one I keep seeing pop up online is people are like, oh, there's going to be an application that edits for you. I don't know if that's in the near future, because I feel like that's a lot of coding that it has to figure out nuances and things that we...
It depends what you mean by editing. Given that we've had some success going down that path, it largely depends on the metadata that you can provide, and very much based on that metadata. But First Cuts, if you're given the right metadata, First Cuts could produce a reasonably acceptable story arc with, B-roll put in appropriately, but lacking the emotional, compelling thing that makes it human and hard. But if we can get you to that stage in 6 minutes instead of 6 hours, that means you've now got 5 hours and 45 minutes to make that starting point really polished and finished, as opposed to, well, I'm going to take 5 hours to get something and then have an hour to polish it. So,
yeah. The other thing I'm really excited about is virtual reality and like the holodeck or the HoloLens. I keep wanting to call it the holodeck. Just what you can do with that is phenomenal. And like I said, the animation is usually what I see in like the Oculus, and I also haven't seen one that really allows you to play in a sandbox yet, which I think is just because of the amount of work you would have to do to get that. But it's still pretty amazing. Like, I think there was one I saw where you sort of go down on a roller coaster, and that your mind just all of a sudden is like, okay, I'm on a roller coaster. You should really think about this, and it sort of gives you that feeling, even though you're not moving. So
it's funny. That's the signature piece for opening of This is Cinerama.
Oh yeah.
Which you'd be a little young to remember Cinerama, I imagine. But Cinerama was a 3-camera process. And a semicircular screen, so very immersive. And you go from the standard 4:3 screen out to the full width, and then come up over a roller coaster. And so, even with the Cinerama partial widescreen or wraparound, you're getting that far more real experience than.
And it was full stereo instead of mono sound.
Yeah. So you got a much better sound. Well, actually, it was 5.1 or 7.1 or something. 7-channel sound, if I remember. I know there's a lot of channels. I've had a lot of experience on the Cinerama restorations because of one of my clients was involved. So the odd side effect is I have IMDb credits for movies made before I was born.
The other little piece of technology, and I've forgotten its name unfortunately, but the only way I've seen it implemented is that it sits on top of your television when you're playing a game, and it's kind of shooting you so that it knows you're interacting with...
Like the Kinect?
Kinect, that's it, thank you. Yeah, so you're interacting with the device without a controller, keyboard, mouse, joystick, anything.
I love the Kinect. I wish Microsoft was doing more with it, because there's a lot of applications that they could easily connect it to. I know there was a hack to connect it to your NLE for a bit.
That would be cool.
It was buggy because it was just someone, like, literally there was no, because they never released an SDK or whatever it is for Mac. So this person had to get a hacked version of the SDK that works on Mac, and then they had to hack it to work on whatever NLE they connected to, and so it worked, but it was really buggy. So like I think it was this is play forward, this is rewind, this is stop, like that type of stuff. So, which was pretty good, but then there were still commands you had to go to your keyboard for.
Fair enough. It's probably much more limited about what you can sort of gesture. But
well, I think if they added voice, which wasn't really around at the time when Kinect first came out, it would really work, because you could just be like, you could do the movements, and then you could be like, insert.
There was a short-lived version of Media Composer that was voice activated.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think I would want "Oh shit" Matt to for all stop.
Yeah, or what something that automatically crashes it when the director or the producer's bugging you, and you just be like, I'm right on that. Oh no, it crashed.
Yeah. How do you deal with the politics of the edit bay?
I try to stay out of them. I hate politics. That's like my number one pet peeve. Because a lot of it isn't geared towards what's best for the project. A lot of it's just geared towards someone's ego. So usually, I always try to, like, if someone throws out an idea, we'll try it and experiment with it because that's the best thing you can do. And if it doesn't work, then you can compare the two, and that's usually the best approach. But I've also had people like argue over something not because it was best for the film, but because they wanted it, and that gets really frustrating. I worked on a short where this person was in a wheelchair and they wheel all the way down this hallway, and they get to the end, and then they like try a doorknob and it's locked. And I'm like, and then the next scene is like him getting in and all that. And like the director wanted it all the way down. It was like a 3, took forever. And I'm like, oh no, just the last little bit, not trying the note. And he's like, no, it has to be all the way. And I'm like, but why? Like, what are we getting from that shot? That's
Getting very bored.
Yeah, and that was my my stance. So, and in that case, it's a tricky one because like it had nothing to do with what's best for the film. It was
Right.
he just wanted it. So, and at a certain point, you kind of, if it's his film, it's like, all right, it's your film.
Yeah, it's that sort of indulgence that people can do in film that they'd never get away with in television because television is just so tight.
Well, that was I'm like, if we were doing a television show, it'd be like, oh, we're 30 seconds over. Well, remove 30 seconds from that long shot.
Retime it.
Yeah, exactly.
Slow thing down now. Just to sort of wrap us up, what would be your fondest hope for your future career?
I'd like to just keep growing AOTG. I really enjoy doing that and meeting people and working with people on things and helping people get the word out about stuff. And I find that a lot of post-professionals are usually the most open and engaging of the film industry. Like they're more open to working with you on something or giving you feedback. And whereas because I have done stuff on set and I'm not a fan of sets.
I hate production. Really.
And it's so boring.
It's not the time to take the takes that takes the time. It's the time between the takes that takes the time to take the takes.
Yeah, exactly. Say that 10 times fast.
And where can people find more about you and Art of the Guillotine?
You can go to aotg.com, and of course you can get us on Twitter, AOTG Network, or at AOTG Network, and Facebook, facebook.com/AOTG Network.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you for having lunch with us.
Thanks.